Welcome to this edition of Simsbury School News. My name is Dominique Avery. Today, my guests are the two new assistant principals hired over the summer for Simsbury Schools, one at Simsbury High School and the other at Henry James Middle School. There was lots of competition for both jobs. 117 applications were received for the job at the high school and 159 for the junior high school. And after the finalists were selected and the interviews conducted, it turned out that the two candidates chosen were both already working at the very schools they were interviewing for. They are joining me today, Georgia Roberts, the assistant principal at Simsbury High School, and Anjanette Belmonte, right?
Yes.
Who is the new assistant principal at Henry James Middle School. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
I always enjoy meeting teachers and students, and it's always such a thrill. And so now I'm going to start with you by asking, I'm asking each of you to tell me sort of where you went to school and what got you into teaching in the first place. And Georgia, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Well, I went to Mount Holyoke College. And I really had some amazing teachers myself over the years, and in particular, I really connected with several of my high school teachers. So there was a Spanish teacher and an English teacher who just really made school exciting and enjoyable for me. And I loved school even back then. And I had a feeling that it would be a natural fit for me. I love working with people. I love to learn. And I really feel strongly that education can really change someone's path. And so I knew that was the direction that I was headed.
So you never considered elementary school. It wasn't until high school that your high school teachers awakened this.
Right, yes. And I think for me, I was just reflecting today that, high school is the right place for me. I think elementary school teachers have a special gift and an entirely different level of patience. And I know you hear elementary teachers say the same thing. I don't know how you do it. I will say I panicked a little when I was about to student teach. I was 21 at the time, so I was a little young. And so at the last minute, I asked if I could go to the middle school because I just thought that I looked ridiculously young to step into the high school.
The student or the teacher was.
Yeah, and I'm glad I did that because I really love both levels.
So let me ask you just about going to Mount Holyoke. Did they have a teaching degree there, or did?
No. So I was, there for the bachelor's degree, and then I'm from Western Massachusetts, and UMass Amherst had a great one-year program where I could work in the Springfield Public Schools, and the professors came down to Springfield and taught the classes. So I knew about halfway through Mount Holyoke that might be the path that I would go down.
So, Anjanette,
Yes.
Now to you.
Sure.
So the same questions, a little bit about what got you into teaching, what made you want to do that, and where you went to school, where you studied.
Sure. So I'm from Long Island, and I would honestly say that I have pictures of myself from when I was 2 and 3 years old, just all the way up to just being even in middle school and high school, always just playing school. My sister and I would just spend every afternoon playing together. I would teach her, I would be the student, we would change up roles, and my mother always said, "You're just going to be a teacher when you're older." She's like, "You just love to learn." She's like, "You love to educate others." She's like, "This is what you're meant to do." And just growing up, I said, this is exactly my passion. I loved being around kids. I loved working with adults. And I wound up going to Queens College, where I received my bachelor's degree in English literature because I always loved to read and write. So it was just not only the passion for reading and writing, but also just working with others and helping them learn to be their best. And then after I went to Queens College, I wound up at Malloy College, where I received my master's in education. And then fast forward to 2007, I decided to, in conversations with my family, we decided to move to Connecticut. I had taught in New York for 5 years, all middle school. And then when we moved here, I was grateful enough to get a wonderful job here in Simsbury. And I've been teaching here for the last 10 years.
So it's really interesting. Both of you got bachelor degrees, having nothing to do with education. Which I sort of approve of that. You have a subject matter strength, which is, and I bet that impressed the people in Simsbury
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
So. Your story about teaching reminds me. I taught school for 5 years too, and my mother also always said, "Oh, you're a natural-born teacher" from the time I was 2 years old. But it didn't suit me. I discovered that early, so I'm glad that it worked out better for you.
Thank you.
Georgia, when did you come to Simsbury High School, and where did you work before? I read that you've had quite extensive experience before you got here.
Yeah, so I'm certified to teach in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, and most recently I was at Ellington High School, I think for about 8 years, and I was an English teacher there, and I was also what they call a curriculum assistant. So I would do some of the leadership. They didn't have department heads or department supervisors, but they had a curriculum assistant. And so for several years, I was sort of in that world of being the liaison between the administration and the English department. And from there, I decided to go back and get the degree in administration. And that's really what led me to Simsbury, was when that English supervisor position was open.
So that's what you came. So you've not really been. Have you been teaching as well? At
I was able to teach for 3 years. So the department supervisors at the high school teach a couple classes and then also supervise. So I think we had 14 teachers in the department, and I taught a different subject every year, so I would get a chance to learn as many curriculums as I could. So I taught 10th grade, 9th grade, and most recently the advanced placement literature class, which was a dream class and very difficult to give that up.
Okay, I'm interested in what kids do nowadays in English literature. So what did you teach in 10th grade, and what did you teach in the AP class?
Well, 10th grade was fun. It was like a lot of archetypal heroes and the hero's journey, and looking at what a tragic hero is. So it was Macbeth and Oedipus, Lord of the Flies, a few newer things sprinkled in as well. And then with the advanced placement literature class, it really was, a dream class. It was able to teach Hamlet and Heart of Darkness, newer things. I'm a big fan of Tim O'Brien's work, so the kids would read the things they carried, and they were usually very passionate about that work of literature. Beloved by Toni Morrison. And it was just an exciting class. It was seniors and eager to learn and be there, and sort of at that time where they're changing and about to go off to college. And so it was an absolute joy it was a joy to teach all the classes, but that one in particular really, it was just the academic side of it was so intriguing that it was really fun to teach.
You have great enthusiasm, so I'm sure that.
That's why I was in the classroom for so many years. Yes.
So I'm sure that was very exciting for the students.
Yeah. And now I'm excited to be, bouncing around in different disciplines and working with art teachers and social studies.
So we'll talk a little about your new job in a little bit. And Jeanette, let me go back to you.
Sure.
You said something about moving from New York to Connecticut, and I'm sort of curious as to why. Was it a family thing or something you don't have to tell me?
Sure.
And then tell me a little bit about what job brought you to Henry James and what you taught.
Yep. So I moved here in 2007. I lived down in Cromwell, and essentially my family started to move here. I've had a sister who lived in Connecticut for the past 17 years, and then my mom, once the rest of us were married and living with our spouses and having children, she decided to retire and move to Connecticut as well to be with my sister and her family. And I kind of said, gee, my mom is here, my sister is here. Let's take a chance, let's take a risk, and let's go be with my family. And my wonderfully supportive husband was like, okay, not a problem. Make sure you promise to go back to New York and see my family. And I said, of course we will. So I was teaching on the North Shore of Long Island for 5 years in a wonderful, very comparable middle school to Simsbury. So all I've ever known is middle school. I have no other teaching experience outside of 7th and 8th grade. And when I came to Connecticut, while we were essentially trying to sell our house, trying to buy a house here and just get acclimated to living, I was pursuing jobs. And I really spoke to my realtor, I spoke to my sister, I spoke to my mom, and I said, kind of help me if I move to Cromwell. Where should I go? Where shouldn't I go? And they were like, you know what? You're new and you're adventurous. Just put yourself out there and see what comes your way. And I happened to go to a wonderful job fair, and I met Erin Murray, and I met lots of other staff members. And I was offered the job after a few rounds of interviews, and I've been employed here for the past 10 years. So I started in middle school, I transitioned to middle school, and it's what I know. I live and breathe it. So it was just a really natural transition.
So you're also teaching English,
Yep.
or you taught English and language
Sure.
arts. Yeah.
For 11 years, I taught 7th and 8th grade middle school language arts. And then for the last 3 years, I moved into the role of the school's instructional coach. So I did that for a solid 3 years, where I was able to help teachers of all different disciplines and content areas really acclimate into the Common Core standards. We talked about literacy and what that looks like in a math class versus a social studies class versus an art class, and really was able to help coach the teachers to then really therefore impact students so that we could see their learning just grow and bloom and blossom.
So that's
It's
what
been
I was
great.
going to ask you about. I saw it, literacy
Yeah.
coach. What is
Yeah.
that? So
So-
you were teaching teachers.
Teaching teachers, That's right. Focused on literacy, so embedding reading and writing strategies to really help the kids just be as successful as they can be.
So, Georgia, you mentioned in passing that you also sort of, from teaching, you moved into sort of a supervisory position at Simsbury High School. What was that, and how did you work with the other teachers?
That was the role of English supervisor, and so it was great preparation, I think, for the role that I'm in now, because I was new to the school and sort of came in that supervisory role new and had to learn, how to form relationships, how to give good feedback. And I had done some of that in Ellington, but it was different. It was teachers that I had known for years and years and years, and it wasn't quite the same level of supervisory that I had as an English supervisor. And then also I worked closely with the administration of the high school and the other department supervisors. So it's a great leadership team structure that is at the high school. And
One that has changed a great deal.
it has, yes. And, some of the English supervisors were, new, and then some of the department supervisors were new, and then some had been there for years and years. So the team did change over time, and it's just a great way to facilitate that communication sort of back and forth from the teachers to the administration, and work on those projects together, and great people to collaborate with.
So I mentioned at the very beginning of the show how many applications were submitted for the 2 assistant principal jobs. I think a lot of people really would like to be in Simsbury and work here. But I think that it might interest the people who watch the show to find out a little bit about what the interview process was and how they eliminated some of the other people, and how many interviews did you have to go through. Anjanette, you want to start?
Oh, let me think about this.
I read somewhere
were
something about 4 interviews.
I was going to say there were definitely a handful. I was traveling this summer, so I came back and forth from Lake George a few times to come in and interview. There was definitely 3 to 4, certainly. So starting with a large committee that had to have well over a dozen people. And then a second round, which was a tiny bit smaller but still large, comprised of various stakeholders within the district. And then moving forward, the committee just got smaller. And then eventually, as the selected candidate, you get to meet with Matt
Curtis.
and Neil. And
So you already knew. So was Neil part of the? So he knew
sure.
you were ready. So
Yes. And one thing that was
Neil
interesting,
Sullivan, for people who
Right.
are the new personnel
Yep.
person in charge of personnel.
Yep.
and Eileen Eustace leaving was, it was an impactful move, and so we sort of knew in the spring, that was going to happen, and so I had the opportunity. I think they had some sessions where they kind of just were bringing teachers in and having teachers sort of talk about what they might be looking for.
Right, their vision moving
Right,
forward.
which I thought was great. And at the time, I was sort of sitting in on those just more in that role of I'm sort of in a middle leadership position at the school.
Right.
And this is a great opportunity to hear what other teachers are sort of thinking about. And, you know, over time, sort of gave it a little bit of thought once school had winded down and decided to jump in. So it was exciting, and I think on my end, there was a lot of surprise when each phone call came through that I was, you know,
Moving
still in the
forward,
running and moving forward. And I feel incredibly grateful, and it was an intense process, definitely, but well worth it.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So you've both been doing the job for a very short time. You have already not been teaching for a while. You were doing literacy coaching, but you were still teaching, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was in classrooms every day, co-teaching with teachers, modeling lessons, working in small groups with students, so I don't feel like I ever left the classroom.
So do you have a lot of interaction with students?
Tons.
Tons? Yeah.
It's great. I think I make it a priority to be visible, to be out in the hallways, to pop into classrooms, to be present at lunch, definitely during homeroom classes, certainly when I'm working with kids on choices that they're making. My whole day is pretty much filled up with kids in lots of different settings.
Okay, so maybe I jumped ahead. Maybe we should go back to what does an assistant principal do in the middle school and in the high school? So
Sure.
Who wants to go first?
Oh, I can jump in.
Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of older people, myself included, we went to school when there was a principal, perhaps, and not, sort of not a lot of support. And I know I've had people explain to me over the years how much more sort of bureaucratic work there is now, and all kinds of things that have to be done. But never mind me. You tell me, what is an assistant principal? The role of assistant principal?
Well, definitely the teacher evaluation system has changed dramatically, even just recently, the last 4 years or so. And so, a big part of it is that I have 4 major departments that are sort of under my umbrella, and I work with those department supervisors, and I'm the primary evaluator for those teachers.
What are those departments?
So I have the physical education department, art, social studies, and guidance, which is very new and fun for me because while I always collaborated and worked closely with guidance counselors, it was always, regarding a student versus just being much more well educated on their world. And then definitely there's a lot of discipline. It can be little things and it can be bigger things on occasion. And then also, for me, a big piece of it is supporting students and families and educators through the special education process. So there are a fair amount of meetings. We might have a meeting to get ready for an evaluation meeting. And then sort of periodically you kind of come together as a team and review how the individual education plan is working for a student and what needs to be changed. And so that's also a really big part of it. And just trying to get out to events and, like Anjanette said, be visible and be, football games. And I've always been one to kind of go to all the school plays, the one-act plays. So it's a very, you could be out every night, I think.
It's very to busy
pick
high
and
school.
you have to really kind of pick and choose. But, I think that, again, the team's been very supportive on that piece of it. And but I love being in the classroom. I definitely, the first month or so, was missing having my own little classroom and my own little domain. But, I've gotten to know some of the students who sort of need my coaching on good decision making more. And, they're my little crew of students now.
So, Anjanette, at the middle school, how many assistant principals is there?
Just
one?
me.
Just one.
Yep.
So you replaced Jeff Pinney.
I did.
Yes.
Okay. So, very similar to what Georgia does. However, I would say a big piece of my job is also the schedule. So I will start to embark on the process of creating the schedule for next year. So that calls for what the teachers will do on a daily basis, as well as student placement. So that's a big piece that I'm excited to learn about and to actually get my hands on and grapple with. The discipline piece for sure, the teacher evaluations are a huge piece of it. And mostly for me, it's really just maintaining that the building is functioning, that it's up and running every day, that it's a safe environment, that it's a productive environment, making sure that everything is okay from the bus runs, that the cafeteria is up and running, that our custodians need what they need, to the nurses, to the teachers. So it's kind of the maintenance, the facility piece as well for me, just kind of ensuring that the building is running smoothly so that Brian, our principal, is able to kind of take care of different pieces of the puzzle throughout the day. So real team effort.
So I've interviewed over the years a lot of faculty members from Henry James. The last interview I did was with Brian Foreman and
Wonderful.
Haddad. And I have been struck by the fact that Henry James strikes me as a pretty great middle school, and a lot of people think
wonderful.
Middle school is a terrible
I know.
time. Yeah.
I don't know why they say that. I love it. It's all I've ever known.
So is Henry James unusual, or is this, do we have a misimpression of middle school?
I think middle school's just a tough time for kids. I mean, they're growing up. There are a lot of, there's a lot of peer pressure. The social pressure is there. Kids are trying to figure out who they are, what they're interested in. Sometimes friendships come and go very quickly, which is different for them. But that, to me, is what's exciting about it, is that as teachers and as faculty and as administrators, you have the ability to really leave such a lasting impression on a middle school student because, one day they love you, they need you, they want you, they just want that reassurance. And then other days it's like we have to have that tough conversation because of choices that they've made that may not have been in the best interest. But it's just such the up and down because they're growing and changing. That to me is where you have the biggest impact on kids. And you really can say, this is why I do what I do, because I made an impression on a student and hopefully we help steer them in a really positive direction. So, and I think having Brian and Doug in here really just is a great testimony to say we do have an amazing staff. They love the kids, they love teaching, they love Simsbury, they love the school. And I'm just really happy to hear that they were here because they're wonderful
and they were
teachers.
very exciting. They were,
I think middle school's great.
Right. So to stay on middle school for a second,
Sure.
A lot of school systems, their middle school starts in 5th grade and it goes for 4 years. Okay. And Simsbury has stayed with the 7th and 8th grade model.
Right.
And I personally think the 7th and 8th grade model is better. I just assume that the younger kids be the older kids in elementary school and not
Right.
mix with the older kids so often, so soon in their young lives. So now I've told you what I think. I should have been asking you what you two think. You have experience in middle school too.
I mean, the other school that I worked in on Long Island was a 6, 7, 8. So I kind of feel with 2 years, you don't have a lot of time with the kids. They're in pretty quickly. They leave pretty quickly. I'm not sure. I think if you were to bring in a 6th grade population that, in 5th grade, they were looked at as the older leaders. And then in 6th grade, if they were to transition to a middle school, that they would have so many additional role models to look up to. But I don't know. It seems to work, 7 and 8, while it's a fast amount of time that they're with us. They get along well.
And you guys still have teams,
We
right?
do. I think regardless of how many years of school you have in a junior high or a middle school, it's the teaming concept that really genuinely makes it a middle school. It's just knowing that you have a core group of teachers who have each of you. They know you. They meet frequently to talk about your best interests and how they're supporting and challenging you in positive ways. That, to me, is what makes a middle school excellent. So it doesn't matter 4 grades, 3 grades, 2 or 1. It's how you approach the students and support them. And that's
Georgia,
what we do.
Do you have any thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, I mean, I also, I actually did teach 6th grade for 3 years. I think one of the positives was, you have those content area sort of experts. So I was teaching 6th graders, but could focus on one subject. And I think, I think everyone's working very hard. It's, I think the elementary school teachers always just have so much of a challenge teaching, all of those subjects to kids. So I've seen it work both ways, but I do remember that they'd line up, they wanted a hug at the, the last day. I don't think eighth graders typically don't line up for their hugs.
Some of them do. Yeah, they do.
And I just remember, very eager, so I remember, because I knew I was leaving to take a high school position back home, and I was leaving the Boston area, and I remember when I was asking a question towards the end of the school year, and all these hands were going up, and everyone wanted to be called on, and I sort of knew, okay, high school's not going to be quite this. You got to work harder to draw out that enthusiasm.
So I told you that this would go quickly. We have hardly any time left, and at the very end, I always like to ask if you can tell us a little bit about your personal life, if you have a family, where you live, just in a few seconds. You're both married. You both have children, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I have two sons. They are 9 and 6. We live sort of right over the border in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. They love their school. More and more, they're coming down here. They've got their Simsbury shirts, and they've come to some football games. But they're very happy in Longmeadow, and and they love school too. And it's exciting for me to be able to see what they come home with on that end too, as a parent, but also as an educator. And again, I'm just always so impressed with what they're doing.
Right. Yep. And again, so we reside in Cromwell. I have an 11-year-old son who's in 6th grade, and I have an 8-year-old daughter who's in 3rd grade. My son is definitely the math science brain in the family, and my daughter is the musician. She's the artist. So they're really nicely well balanced, and they play their various roles. As a family, we really just love to travel together. We try to go anywhere that we can.
You mentioned you were traveling this summer.
Yep.
We've run out of time. I told you it would go fast. I'd like to thank everyone here at SCTV behind the scenes for their help in getting the show on the air, including our camera volunteers, Wanda Coleman and Jim Dempsey. Thanks especially to my guests, Georgia Robert and Anjanette Belmonte.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. A reminder that thanks to SCTV volunteers, you could see all Board of Education meetings on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month, live on Xfinity Channel 95 and Frontier 99, and online. If you missed any part of this show, you can find it anytime at simsburytv.org. I'm Dominique Avery. See you next time for Simsbury School News. Since 1984, SCTV has been the place to turn in Simsbury to watch local government in action. But we're more than local government and school meetings. SCTV is the only place where you can check out all the candidates in local elections. We have high school sports and exercise classes. Other shows keep you up on health, finance, poetry, music, and Simsbury hot topics. Now we need your help. Simsbury Community TV is embarking on a major capital fundraising campaign to bring SCTV into the 21st century. We've received a generous grant from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, but now we must match it. We want everyone to watch us on TV or on our website, but even if you never do, please help so that we can continue to keep your government open and you informed. Someday, when there's a crisis, you will want SCTV to be there.
Hi, my name is Steve Mitchell, Vice President of Mitchell Auto Group. I hope you'll join me in supporting SCTV since 1984, your connection to your town, your schools, and your government.